I don't even know what to say, man. I don't know what to say. Very few times have I been left speechless. And I've been screaming about the quality of this show now for the past month. And this episode may have put it completely over the top. This is like Godzilla minus one now to me, in the sense of, like, what I mean by that, let me hear me out for a minute, is I know I'm going to tell all my friends to go see this episode and to catch up with this show. And there, some of them are not going to do it, and I'm going to get mad. I just know, like, I know myself. I know that I'm going to get annoyed because I can't describe. I'm going to have a hard time doing this review because my brain hasn't quite come to terms with what I've just seen. This episode took things to a completely new level. Completely new level. This episode is the 5th episode of X-Men 97. It's called Remember It. And there are multiple love triangles, multiple progressions of storylines here, but the last 7 or 8 minutes of this was some of the most shocking. I mean, it literally goes from one completely different tone to the opposite, just all the way down. They have never, even in the original animated series, because of the restrictions of Fox Kids, they have never captured the X-Men comics at their darkest in that show. They've captured a lot of the comics and a lot of the storylines right, but they never got truly, truly dark. This was dark. Let's talk about the episode. So the episode starts off very optimistically, right? There's a TV interview with the X-Men. It's sort of like an investigative report, and the report is that Genosha has finally been accepted in the United Nations, and a few X-Men are going to go check it out. Magneto is going, along with Rogue and Gambit, and they go to Genosha in the new Blackbird. And when they end up going to the Genosha, it turns out that Madeline Pryor is there, so she found a nice place to go, and Nightcrawler appears. So I popped. Nightcrawler is there. It's very optimistic. Then things start getting a little hazy when it comes to this story. So there's always been a love triangle between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, and it's explored in this episode. But there's also another love triangle now, and that's between Cyclops, Jean Grey, and Madeline Pryor. And this episode does a phenomenal job, especially during the first half, to really hammer home the amount of pain and discomfort that Cyclops is in because of all this. All three of them are in complete disarray. So even though Mr. Sinister's plan, they were able to defeat him, he kind of got the last laugh on them because he's made their life miserable. So there's a beautiful scene where they cut between Jean Grey and Cyclops, and Jean Grey is like avoiding the interview and Cyclops is being interviewed. And Jean Grey's like hiding in like this little water area. Wolverine goes there to like kind of make her feel better, and she kisses Wolverine, and he was shocked. His eyes were bulging out, and so was I. Always one of my favorite, love triangles as a kid. And it was interesting because you feel for Wolverine, because he even says it. He goes, it's between you and the Boy Scout. You guys are together. It's just the way it is. So Cyclops gets pissed off about the reporter because she brings up the fact that they have medical records of him and Jean Grey having a baby. He says, I don't have a kid. And she brings up Nathan, and he has a meltdown, and it's understandable. He's a wreck. I mean, not just that, but remember the doctor refused to even give birth, calling it a freak and all that. Like, Cyclops even says, like, you're lucky that we're so nice. And he's right. It's the Magneto thing. Like, human beings are lucky that mutants are so kind. Most of them. Because otherwise they'd all be dead. You understand what I'm saying? So, there's this meeting in Genosha between Magneto, Sebastian Shaw, Moira McTaggart, Emma Frost, which is the White Queen. Sebastian Shaw was actually there, like I mentioned that, from the Hellfire Club, the Inner Circle, and the old X-Men show, because they couldn't call it the Hellfire Club, and Banshee. So Rogue mentions Magneto and her getting back together, and I'm like, wait, they were together? I know in the comics, in the Age of Apocalypse they were, and there were other stories, but not in the original cartoon canon. Well, we find out there's a flashback of Rogue meeting Magneto way back when she was the daughter of Mystique. And it's funny because that's where they discuss how she had feelings for him and they all kind of grew together. And it's funny because Rogue tells Gambit, she's like, you know, me and him pretended like it never happened, which is code for it wasn't written in the old show and we're retconning. But it's a good retcon because it makes sense with things to come. So while all that's going on, there's another plot with Madeline Pryor and Cyclops, and they have this weird psychic connection because of his grief and confusion. And Jean Grey knows about it, and she's angry. But at the same time, like, what can you do? I mean, the guy says he loves them both. She's mad. I mean, they're just put in a very awkward situation. Pryor starts getting like nosebleeds thinking about like having flashbacks of Jean. So they have this ballroom scene where Magneto and Rogue kind of dance, and it's made up to be a thing. Gambit, first of all, tells her that, you know, we're just going to be friends, right? Friend zones her, right? And then she's with Magneto, and she kind of felt something, but she's like, you know what? Like, we can't take this any further. Again, it's very sad to have feelings for somebody and not be able to get with them. Like, it's sad. We've all been through it. I know many of you have been through it. It's part of life. It's just the sad part of life. So, out of nowhere, Cable appears, a.k.a. Nathan Summers, and he apologizes. He sees Madeline Pryor. She recognizes his eyes, and he appears, and he's like, I don't have much time. Then he goes back to the future. So I'm like, wait, what does that mean? And that, I have theories about this, which I'm going to discuss later on. So Madeline Pryor recognizes and knows that Cable is indeed their son, which has always been the case, like in the comics. So then the place gets attacked. Many characters die, including Callisto and Sebastian Shaw. There's a scene where you think that Nightcrawler's dead, and it looks like he's dead. The dude's covered with blood, and Gambit says that he's alive. So these Sentinels attack, and they're led by this giant three-headed Sentinel. Now, the three-headed Sentinel was in the comics as the Tri-Sentinel all the way back in the day. But man, these Sentinels and the Tri-Sentinel is way more powerful. This is a different level of Sentinel. So there's a bunch of stuff so the place is getting wrecked. Genosha's being attacked. Clearly, whoever sent these Sentinels did not want humans and mutants to come together. Also, comically enough, they refer to the Tri-Sentinel as the Godzilla Sentinel, which I thought was really clever. So there's a sequence with Gambit and Rogue that's unbelievable. Magneto is fighting this thing. He sends a train into the Sentinel, just a massive battle. This was, I cannot describe this. I mean, if you saw it, you know. This was about as perfect as it gets. It almost feels like the writers of Invincible, like, or maybe not the writers of Invincible, but whoever, like the people that wrote this show, Bo DeMayo and the rest of the crew, they obviously watched Invincibles and were like, you know, we can probably do something like this. You don't want to do this all the time. You don't want to make it into a gimmick. But it was so well done. So there's a badass scene with Gambit where he rides like the head of the Sentinel while swinging the staff, wearing the white like ballroom clothing that he had, spinning the staff or whatever, and then he throws the card into the Sentinel. It was such a, oh my god, Gambit is so awesome. So there's a scene where it looks like Magneto is killed because the Sentinel straight up says like Omega level threat detained or something like that. And Rogue is so mad at seeing Magneto die because remember, she still has some deep feelings from before. She gets angry and powers up. I mean, this was like something out of an anime. This was like something out of an anime, yo. It was so beautiful. And she flies at the Tri-Sentinel, and Gambit, oh my god, Gambit sees it, gets on a bike, rides it, activates his power to light up the bike to shove her out of the way to avoid this blast. Gambit then says, okay, I'm going to take you on, rushes in, and he gets stabbed through the stomach. He uses his powers from the stomach wound to ignite the Sentinel and destroy it. What an absolute insane way to kill an enemy. Meanwhile, I'm watching this and my jaw is on the ground. And Rogue, he's dead. He's covered with blood. And he's fucked up. And Rogue holds him and cries and says, Remy, I can't feel you. Fade to black. Unbelievable. I was not expecting this. The difference between this and Invincible is that with Invincible, yeah, it was shocking to see all those characters die and whatnot. That's all true. These are characters that I've known since I was in second grade. You understand what I'm saying? I grew up with this. I literally grew up with X-Men being my favorite show as a kid. So they bring it back and they do something like this, which there's no question people are going to be talking about this episode for weeks, because guess what? Next week's episode is not going to follow this up. Presumably speaking, they have to follow up the Storm storyline from Life Death. So that'll be next week. So they're going to make us wait 2 weeks to get any kind of resolution to this story arc. I have a theory. I think, and it's not, this theory wasn't all developed by me. Jordan Dragon Lee in my Discord server is the one that first thought of it. Cable going back in time to warn Madeline Pryor about what was about to happen, I think is going to be, and is going to end up being the key. I think Cable is, that they're going to fix it with Cable time traveling. And because Cyclops was so distraught at having to give up his son, it's going to be a situation where Cyclops and Jean Grey and Madeline Pryor, to cope with all of this madness that Mr. Sinister caused, it's going to be just a comforting thing at the end of the day once this gets resolved, if it does the way I think, because Cable's going to be the one to save the day with time travel, right? And they're going to understand that them giving up their son, Cyclops and Madeline giving up Nathan to the future, is actually what ends up saving the present. You understand? If Nathan had stayed behind in the present, with the techno-organic virus and everything, he would have died and they would have died. But him going to the future, I think, is going to be the key. They gave us a little teaser here. This whole season, from episode 1, is all about Cable. As a baby, with Madeline Pryor, and as an adult from the future. The writing in this show. And you have to understand, dude, I grew up with this show, and I was excited for X-Men 97. I never knew that they would do something like this. This is, as far as I'm concerned, if this continues, this show has surpassed the original. End of story. That's the way I feel. It's just, it is the adult version for all the kids that grew up. This is the adult version, the adult sequel that we all wanted. It just is. X-Men 97 is a better sequel to X-Men than Dragon Ball Super is to Dragon Ball Z. Controversial, yeah, but it's true. I'm sorry, it's true. This is a new level of writing. Anyways, man, I don't know. This was, I don't even know what to say anymore. I will close out the review. Leave your comments on one of the craziest pieces of Marvel stuff we've ever seen. Damn, what a good show this is.